The sun was slowly setting behind the wide desert, turning the sky orange and gold as the small town of Red Creek prepared for another quiet evening. But not everyone was calm that day. A group of rough-looking men had gathered at an old wooden yard on the far edge of town, a place people usually avoided. The yard looked abandoned, broken fences, dry ground, and rusty metal sheets lying everywhere. Yet today, whispers were spreading that something unusual was happening there, something that didn't feel right. Among the crowd of men was a young girl named Lena. She stood near a wooden post, her small hands tied loosely in front of her. She was about 10 or 11 years old, with dusty clothes and tired eyes that showed she had been moving from place to place without rest. Her dark hair was messy, and her face looked pale from fear. She didn't know anyone there, and she didn't understand how she ended up in this dangerous place. Everything had happened so fast. One moment she thought she found people who would help her, and the next she realized she was surrounded by men who had no kindness in their hearts. Lena kept her head down, but her eyes scanned the ground, hoping someone, anyone, would notice her fear and come to her side. She didn't cry loudly. She had learned long ago that loud crying only made some people angrier. Instead, she whispered softly, almost as if she was talking to herself. "Please, don't let them buy me." Her voice was thin, trembling, barely reaching her own ears. Not far away, just outside the gate of the old yard, stood a cowboy named Caleb. He had come into Red Creek earlier that afternoon to sell supplies from his ranch and maybe rest for a night before traveling again. But as he rode through town, he noticed people talking quietly, exchanging worried glances, pointing toward the deserted edge of town. Caleb was not the type to involve himself in every rumor, but something about the tension in the townspeople's voices made him uneasy. He guided his horse closer to the place everyone whispered about. As he approached, he saw the group of men, the wooden yard, and the uneasy gathering. He stopped his horse some distance away, watching carefully. Caleb had lived long enough to know when something was wrong, and everything about this scene was wrong. No one in that group looked like they were doing honest work. They kept shifting around nervously, speaking in low voices, and glancing over their shoulders. Then Caleb's eyes stopped on the little girl. Lena looked too frightened, too lost, too small to be among men like these. The fear in her eyes reached straight into Caleb's heart. He didn't know her story, but he could see clearly that she was in danger. He remembered a similar day many years ago, back when he was younger and not as brave. A child had needed help then, too. Caleb had hesitated that day. He had told himself someone else would step in, but no one had. The memory stayed with him, turning into a quiet ache he carried everywhere he went. Seeing Lena now brought that old memory back sharply, like a wound that had never fully healed. Caleb climbed down from his horse slowly, moving closer and listening to the men's conversations. He heard them laughing and talking about new buyers coming soon. He didn't need to hear more to understand what they planned. His jaw tightened. This wasn't just wrong. It was the kind of wrong that demanded action. He didn't rush in. Caleb was cautious, thoughtful, and calm even in dangerous moments. He stood near the entrance of the yard, watching, analyzing, deciding what to do. He noticed that the group had a leader, tall, wide-shouldered, with a thick beard and a loud voice. This man barked orders at the others, telling them to hurry and prepare things before the buyers arrived. He walked around like he owned the world, showing no worry, no shame. Caleb hated men like him. He stepped forward, his boots crunching on the dry dirt. Several men turned their heads. Their eyes narrowed when they saw him. They were not pleased to see an outsider approaching. But Caleb didn't stop. He walked calmly toward the wooden yard, his hands relaxed at his sides, his face steady. He didn't want to start a fight. Not yet. But he also wasn't going to pretend he didn't see what was happening. The leader frowned as Caleb came closer. "You lost, cowboy?" he asked, sounding annoyed. Caleb didn't answer at first. He looked past the men, straight at Lena. She lifted her eyes, and for a moment, they met his. In that single moment, her silent fear spoke louder than any words could. Something inside Caleb hardened. He looked back at the leader. "No," Caleb finally replied, "but it looks like someone else is." The leader laughed, a harsh, unpleasant sound. "This ain't your business," he said. "Keep walking." Caleb didn't move. "She looks scared," he said quietly, nodding toward Lena. "And she shouldn't be here." The men exchanged glances, confused by Caleb's calm tone. Most people who confronted them did so with anger or fear. But Caleb's confidence made them uneasy. The leader took a step forward, trying to look threatening. "We're handling our own matters," he said. "Best you stay out of it." Caleb shook his head slightly. "I don't think your matters are legal." A tense silence settled over the yard. Some men shifted, others frowned, and a few looked toward the exits, unsure how this would end. The leader crossed his arms. "You got a loud mouth for someone standing alone," he said. Caleb's fingers brushed the side of his belt where his revolver rested in its holster. He wasn't itching to use it, but he was ready if things turned bad. He knew he had only one bullet left, but the men didn't know that. What mattered now wasn't firepower, but courage. And Caleb had enough of that to stand against all of them if needed. Lena watched quietly. She didn't understand everything being said, but she could tell the cowboy wasn't afraid of the men who had been threatening her. She felt a tiny spark of hope inside her chest, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Caleb took another step forward, speaking softly but firmly. "Let the girl go," he said. "You don't need this kind of trouble." The leader smirked. "We don't need trouble, but we don't need you either." One of the men behind him added, "You should ride away before someone gets angry." Caleb ignored the warning. His eyes stayed on Lena, offering a silent promise that he wouldn't leave her alone. He remembered every moment of the child he failed to save years ago. He had sworn to himself that if he ever faced something like that again, he would not hesitate. And he didn't. The men waited for him to back down. Most strangers did. But Caleb stayed right where he was, his posture strong, his expression unshaken. Something about him made even the roughest man pause. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't reach for his weapon. He simply stood there with a kind of steady courage that made the group realize he wasn't just passing through. He was ready to stand between them and the girl. Lena felt the air in the yard change. She watched the cowboy with wide eyes, wondering how someone she had never met could care enough to stand up for her. Caleb finally said, "You can walk away now, all of you, and no harm will come to anyone." The leader glared at him, clearly angry but also unsure. He wasn't used to someone speaking to him this way. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the town. A few townspeople, worried about the whispers they had heard, had come to see what was happening. The men grew restless, exchanging nervous looks. Caleb didn't move. He knew this was just the beginning. What came next could be far more dangerous. But he also knew that if he walked away now, Lena would be lost. And that was something he refused to let happen. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the yard. The air grew heavy with tension. Lena took a small step forward, gathering every bit of courage she had, and whispered again, louder this time. Hoping Caleb would hear her clearly, "Please, don't let them buy me." And that whisper was enough to strengthen Caleb's resolve. He wasn't going anywhere. He would stay. He would protect her, even if it cost him everything. Caleb stood firm in front of the wooden yard, his boots planted in the dusty ground as if nothing could move him. The men around him shifted uncomfortably, whispering among themselves. They had expected him to walk away after being warned, but he didn't. This quiet cowboy who had appeared out of nowhere suddenly felt like a wall they could not push down. Lena watched him with wide, frightened eyes. She didn't know who he was or why he cared, but she could sense that his presence gave her some protection. She had spent so many days feeling invisible, unwanted, and helpless. Yet today, for the first time in a long time, someone was standing between her and danger. Caleb's mind was working quickly as he studied the men. He needed to choose his next move carefully. There were too many of them, and he had only one bullet. He couldn't start a fight, especially with a child nearby, but he also couldn't walk away knowing these men would take Lena somewhere far worse. He took a slow breath and stepped forward again, keeping his voice low and calm. "There's no reason for trouble," he said. "Let the girl go. It's the right thing to do." The leader of the group, his name was Briggs, laughed loudly, trying to show he wasn't intimidated. But Caleb noticed the slight crack in his confidence. Briggs wasn't fully sure how to deal with someone like Caleb, someone who didn't shout, didn't threaten, didn't look scared. "Cowboy," Briggs said, pointing a finger at him, "I don't know who you think you are, but you're stepping into matters you don't understand." Caleb kept his eyes steady. "I understand enough," he answered. "I understand she wants help." Lena lowered her head, tears welling in her eyes. She tried to wipe them with her tied hands, but the ropes made it difficult. Her small shoulders trembled. She didn't want to be a burden, but she couldn't stop the fear from showing. Briggs watched her, then turned back to Caleb. "You think you're a hero?" he asked. "You think you can march in here and tell us what to do?" "No," Caleb said softly. "I'm just someone who won't ignore a child in danger." The other men murmured. Some looked unsure. They weren't used to such calm bravery. They were used to people shouting or running away, not someone standing in front of them with quiet courage. Briggs stepped closer until he was only a few feet away from Caleb. "I'm giving you one chance," he said coldly. "Turn around. Walk away. Forget what you saw." Caleb glanced at Lena again. She whispered something under her breath, too soft for the men to hear, but Caleb caught the meaning in her eyes. She needed him. She trusted him, even though they had never spoken. He shook his head. "I can't do that." The yard fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Briggs stared at Caleb for a long moment, trying to judge whether this cowboy was bluffing. He couldn't read him. Caleb's expression never changed. Quiet, steady, almost peaceful, yet full of unbreakable resolve. Briggs finally snapped his fingers, signaling two of his men to move forward. They stepped toward Caleb with rough expressions, expecting him to back away. But he didn't move. He kept his hands relaxed, his shoulders loose, his posture calm. One of the men stopped a few steps away and scowled. "You got a problem, stranger?" Caleb shook his head slowly. "Not if you leave the girl alone." The man snorted. "She's not your business." "She is now," Caleb said simply. The words hit the group harder than if he had shouted. The men stared at him, trying to understand how someone could speak with so little fear. Briggs groaned in irritation. "You're either very brave," he said, "or very foolish." "Maybe both," Caleb replied. Lena held her breath. She could feel something changing in the air. The tension was building, like a rope being pulled tighter and tighter. Caleb knew talking alone would not convince Briggs. He needed another strategy. He decided to try a more direct approach. "Look," he said, "I don't want to fight. You don't want trouble with the town. Let's end this peacefully." Briggs laughed in disbelief. "Peacefully? You think we came here for peace? We have plans." "Plans that won't go your way," Caleb said quietly. Briggs stepped back, frustrated. He wasn't used to someone refusing to be intimidated. He looked at his men. "Fine," he said. "Show him we're serious." Two men started moving toward Caleb again. Caleb didn't reach for his gun, not yet. Instead, he turned slightly so the men were in his full view, but Lena remained behind him. His stance made it clear that he was protecting her. The men stopped again, noticing how calm he still was. They didn't understand it. Usually, people panicked when surrounded, but Caleb seemed almost too still, too prepared. One of the men asked, "Why do you care so much? She's not yours." Caleb looked at Lena. She looked back with desperate eyes, silently begging him not to leave her. He said, "Because somebody should." Briggs rolled his eyes. "Enough of this," he snapped. "We don't need speeches. We need buyers. And she's staying." Caleb finally allowed his hand to brush the handle of his revolver. He didn't pull it out. He just touched it, enough for Briggs to notice. Briggs's eyes narrowed. "You really think you can stop us with that?" Caleb answered honestly. "I don't want to use it, but I will do what I have to." The truth was, he had only one bullet left, but he wasn't about to reveal that. He hoped he wouldn't have to use it at all. He believed there was still a way to stop this without anyone getting hurt. One of the men suddenly stepped forward, trying to grab Caleb's arm. Caleb moved quickly, stepping back just enough to avoid the grab. The movement was smooth and controlled, like someone who had spent years surviving on instinct. Briggs raised his hand. "Stop! We're not wasting time on him," he said. Then he pointed at Lena. "Take the girl inside. Buyers will be here soon." Lena gasped, shaking her head in panic. She took a small step back, but one of the men tightened his grip on her arm. "No, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. Caleb stepped closer instantly. "Let her go," he said sharply. The man holding Lena smirked. "Make me." Caleb didn't react to the insult. Instead, he looked around the yard again. He counted the men, 8 of them. Maybe more hiding behind the old wooden shed. Too many for him to fight, even with a loaded gun. He needed another way, a smarter way. Caleb spoke calmly. "Briggs, listen. You know the sheriff doesn't ignore trouble. If something happens here, the whole town will know. They'll come fast. You don't want that." Briggs hesitated. He didn't want the sheriff involved. The law in Red Creek was strict, and the sheriff didn't forgive easily. Caleb continued, "Let her go now, and you can walk away without anyone chasing you." The men exchanged nervous glances again. Some of them didn't want to fight, especially not with townspeople nearby. They weren't brave, they were just following orders. Briggs rubbed his forehead, thinking. Caleb watched him carefully, hoping reason might win. But the leader's pride was too strong. His voice turned hard. "No, she stays. And you have 5 seconds to leave." Caleb's jaw clenched. He knew he had run out of time. He touched the revolver again, not drawing it yet, but ready. Lena whispered again, her voice thin and shaking. "Please, don't leave me." Those words cut straight through him. Caleb looked at her gently and said in a firm, quiet voice she could hear clearly, "I'm not going anywhere." Briggs snapped his fingers again. "Grab him!" Before anyone moved, Caleb reached for his revolver, but not to fire. He held it down at his side, showing he wouldn't back away. "Don't do this," he warned softly. Briggs hesitated again. The men paused. No one wanted to be the first to rush the cowboy who stood so confidently. Caleb kept his eyes on Briggs. "Walk away," he said. "This ends better for everyone." Briggs's face twisted with frustration. For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. Caleb had managed something rare. He made the group uncertain, confused, and slowly losing their nerve. Lena watched with a beating heart, her hope growing again. This cowboy, a stranger, was standing alone for her, and he wasn't afraid to do it. Caleb knew the real fight was coming soon. This was just the beginning, but he was ready. He had made his choice. He would protect Lena no matter what happened next, even if it cost him his last bullet. The air around the old wooden yard grew heavier than before. The sky had changed from warm orange to a deeper shade of red as the sun slowly sank behind the distant hills. The whole place felt tense, as if even the wind was afraid to move. Every person there could feel something building, something that could no longer be pushed aside. Caleb stood tall at the center of the yard, his boots planted firmly in the dusty ground. He didn't raise his voice, didn't lift his weapon, didn't make any sudden movements. Yet somehow he had managed to stop an entire group of men from taking another step. His calm presence alone was enough to make them uncertain. Lena stayed close behind him, trembling slightly but feeling safer than she had felt in days. She didn't dare speak, but her eyes stayed locked on the back of Caleb's coat, as if the fabric itself carried hope. Briggs looked around at his men, trying to regain control. He didn't like the way the situation was changing. He could feel the restlessness in his group, the tiny cracks in their confidence. Caleb stood like a solid stone that nothing could shake, and Briggs hated that. He took a step closer to the cowboy. "This is your last warning," Briggs said, trying to sound stronger than he felt. "Move aside." Caleb didn't blink. "No." Briggs expected resistance, but not such a simple, firm answer. That one word carried so much strength that several men exchanged nervous glances again. Caleb took a slow breath. He had spent most of his life avoiding fights unless absolutely necessary. He had seen too much pain, too much regret, too many situations where people got hurt because no one stood up at the right time. This moment felt familiar in a way that twisted a deep part of his heart. He remembered the child he had failed to protect years ago. He remembered the day he found out the child had been taken far away and never returned. That memory was a quiet shadow inside him, reminding him of every step he regretted not taking. But today, standing in front of Lena, Caleb felt something inside him finally rising. He would not repeat that mistake. Not today, not ever again. The men surrounding them grew impatient. One of them, a tall man with a scar on his chin, stepped forward. "Briggs," he muttered, "we can take him. He's just one man." Briggs hesitated. "Maybe," he said, "but he's not acting like he's afraid. That means something." Caleb stayed silent, but he was watching every move. His hand hovered near his revolver, not gripping it fully, not lifting it, just letting it rest there as a clear reminder that he was ready. He didn't want to use it. He hoped he wouldn't have to. But if it became the only way to protect Lena, he knew he would make that choice without hesitation. Another man spoke up, this one younger and more nervous. "What if someone from town comes? He's been stalling us. Maybe he's waiting for others." Briggs turned sharply toward him. "Be quiet," he snapped. But even that reaction revealed fear. Caleb noticed it. The men noticed it. And most importantly, Lena noticed it. Caleb decided it was time to push the advantage he had created without lifting a finger. "You're out of time," he said quietly. "People saw me walk this way. They'll come soon. You know that." Briggs clenched his jaw. He couldn't admit it, but Caleb was right. A single shout or a loud sound could bring half the townspeople running. And once the town saw what they were doing, none of the men would escape easily. Caleb took a cautious step forward, placing himself more firmly between Lena and the men. "Let her go," he said again. "This ends now." The scar-chin man growled. "Enough! I'm done listening." He took a quick step toward Caleb. For 1 second, everything froze. Caleb's hand tightened slightly on his revolver, but he didn't draw it. Instead, he moved his body just enough so the man's path was blocked. His posture shifted into a defensive stance, not threatening, but ready. The man stopped. He hadn't expected Caleb to react so quickly. He looked at Briggs, waiting for guidance. Briggs frowned deeply. The situation was slipping further from his control by the second. He knew he had to regain hold of his men before they all lost confidence. He raised his voice. "Everyone calm down! Don't move unless I say so!" His command held for a moment, and the men stepped back, unsure. Caleb used that moment to speak again, his voice steady and even. "Ask yourselves," Caleb said, "if this is worth it. If this is the choice you want to live with." His words hit many of the men harder than a threat would have. They weren't heartless. They were scared, desperate, or simply following someone stronger than them. But now, watching a child shaking behind a lone cowboy, they began to feel the weight of what they were about to do. Lena saw one of the men lower his head, ashamed. She didn't know who he was or what part he had in her situation, but his reaction gave her a small spark of reassurance. Maybe not everyone here wanted harm. Maybe some of them simply needed someone brave enough to say no. And Caleb had said it. Briggs, however, wasn't ready to give up. His pride was louder than reason. "We don't answer to some stranger," he said harshly, "and we're not walking away empty-handed." Caleb met his eyes. "Then you're making a mistake." Briggs's anger grew. He stepped closer to Caleb, close enough that their breath mixed in the cool evening air. "You think you're some kind of savior," he said with a sneer, "but you're just a man alone with a small gun." Caleb didn't rise to the insult. "I'm someone who won't stand aside while a child begs for help." Lena felt tears slipping down her cheeks again, but these tears were different. They weren't just fear. They were relief that someone truly cared. Briggs glared at Caleb, unable to understand the kind of bravery he was seeing. He felt something else too. Frustration that Caleb's calm courage was unraveling the confidence of his own men. He turned to them again. "Stop looking at him like he's right," Briggs shouted. "We follow the plan." But the men didn't move right away. Briggs saw the hesitation and grew furious. "Fine," he growled. "I'll deal with him myself." He reached for something in his coat, and Caleb's instincts sharpened instantly. Caleb didn't pull his gun, but he held it ready. He didn't speak. He didn't breathe. He simply watched. Briggs hesitated for the briefest second, seeing the cowboy's unwavering eyes. There was no anger in Caleb's expression, just determination, calm and deep. Briggs realized that the cowboy wasn't bluffing. If he made the wrong move, Caleb would stop him. That pause, barely a heartbeat, was enough for the other men to step back, not forward. None of them wanted to be part of what was about to happen. Briggs felt the shift, felt control slipping through his fingers like sand. He stepped back and pointed at Caleb with frustration. "You're ruining everything." Caleb remained still. "No," he said quietly. "I'm saving someone." For a long moment, the yard stayed silent. Even the distant sounds of the town faded away. The standoff had reached its peak. Lena pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady her breaths. She didn't know how this would end. She didn't know if the cowboy would win or if Briggs would do something terrible. But she knew one thing. Caleb wasn't leaving her side. Eventually, Briggs lifted his hand in anger and shouted, "Fine, if you want trouble, you'll get it." The other men tensed. Caleb exhaled slowly. The real confrontation was coming now. And he was ready. He shifted his weight slightly, keeping one foot ahead, one behind, in a stance prepared for anything. He kept his revolver low but ready, knowing one wrong move could change everything. Lena backed up half a step but stayed close, trusting him completely. The final stand between them had begun, and Caleb, with his last bullet, was prepared to face whatever came next, alone if he had to. The evening wind moved softly across the open land as Ethan led Lily toward the small cabin at the edge of the valley. The sky was slowly turning orange, and the sun looked like it was melting behind the hills. Lily kept looking back every few steps as if expecting someone to appear and drag her away. Ethan noticed the fear in her eyes, but he didn't say anything yet. He wanted her to feel safe first, safe enough to talk when she was ready. When they reached the cabin, Ethan opened the door and lit a lantern. A warm glow filled the room. It wasn't fancy, but everything inside was clean. The wooden table, 2 chairs, a folded blanket, and a kettle sitting near the stove. Lily stepped inside carefully, as if she didn't want to disturb anything. She held her hands close to her chest, rubbing them together even though it wasn't cold. Ethan poured her a cup of warm water from the pot he kept ready. She accepted it quietly, her fingers shaking just a little. He didn't ask her any questions. He just sat near the window and looked outside, giving her space. After a long time, Lily spoke in a soft voice that almost faded into the air. Do you think they'll come here?" she asked. Ethan turned his head slowly. "Not tonight," he said. "You're safe here." She nodded, but the fear didn't leave her face. "They always find me," she whispered. "Always." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "Who are they, Lily?" She pressed her lips together, struggling with the weight of the words inside her. "People who think they have the right to control everything I do," she said. "People who make deals about others like they're objects. They don't ask. They don't care. They just decide." Ethan didn't fully understand yet, but he could feel the pain she carried. It wasn't something new. It had been there for a long time. A quiet moment passed between them. Outside, the last bit of sunlight disappeared, and night wrapped the valley in darkness. The first star appeared in the sky, shining alone. Lily kept her eyes on it as if it gave her strength. Ethan set another cup of warm water on the table. "Drink slowly," he said. "You haven't had rest." She sat down, still holding the first cup. "I didn't think anyone would help me," she said softly. "Most people look away when someone is in trouble, or they pretend they didn't hear anything. When you cried out," Ethan said gently, "I knew I couldn't walk away." He paused before continuing. "I've seen people suffer in silence. I didn't want that to happen again." Lily lifted her eyes, surprised by how sincere he sounded. "But helping me might cause trouble for you too." Ethan gave a small smile. "Trouble finds us whether we invite it or not, but some trouble is worth facing." For the first time since he found her, Lily's shoulders relaxed just a little. She placed her cup down and wrapped her arms around herself. "I don't understand why life can be so hard," she said. "Why some people decide the path for others. Why kindness feels rare." Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked at her for a moment, trying to find the right words. "Maybe kindness feels rare because the world moves too fast. People stop noticing each other. But that doesn't mean kindness is gone." Lily sighed, her eyes growing heavy with exhaustion. "I want to believe that," she said. Ethan stood up and placed an extra blanket on the small bed. "You can rest here," he said. "You've had a long day." Lily hesitated. "What about you? Where will you sleep?" "I'll sit outside," Ethan said. "It's peaceful out there, and I need to keep watch anyway." Her expression softened. "You don't have to do that." "I do," he said simply. She nodded, understanding that arguing wouldn't change his mind. She walked over to the bed and touched the blanket as if she didn't believe she was allowed to use it. She looked at him with grateful eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan gave her a quiet nod. After she lay down, Ethan stepped outside, closing the door gently behind him. The night air was cool, and the land around him was silent, except for the sound of insects. He sat on the small bench outside the cabin, his rifle resting beside him. He checked the bullets he had left. Only one remained, his last bullet. He placed it back carefully. He didn't want trouble, but if trouble arrived, he would face it with whatever strength he had. He was more worried about Lily, her fear, her past, and what might be waiting for her in the shadows. Inside the cabin, Lily tried to close her eyes, but her mind refused to rest. Memories rushed through her like a storm. Loud voices, cold hands pulling her, people arguing over her fate, and the moment she broke free. Her heart started beating faster, and she sat up quickly. Sweat covered her forehead and her breath came out in short gasps. She wanted to scream, but she didn't. She forced herself to stay quiet. She placed both hands over her chest, trying to calm her racing heart. After a few minutes, she stepped out of bed and walked toward the door. She opened it slowly. Ethan looked back immediately. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded weakly. "Just bad memories?" He made space beside him. "Sit for a bit," he said. Lily sat on the bench, her hands resting in her lap. The night sky was full of stars now, each one shining like a small promise. She looked up. "It's beautiful," she said. "It is," Ethan agreed. "I used to dream of nights like this," Lily said quietly. "Nights where I didn't have to wonder who would take me away. Nights where I didn't have to pretend everything was fine." Ethan listened without interrupting. "My parents were simple people," she continued. "They worked hard. They taught me to be honest, to help others, to stand up even when life feels heavy. But they're gone now. And after they left, everything changed." "How long have you been alone?" Ethan asked gently. "For years," she whispered. "I learned to trust only myself. But sometimes, even that felt difficult." Ethan looked ahead, his jaw tightening. "No one deserves to live with fear," he said. Lily took a slow breath. "Do you really think they won't find me?" "I'll do everything I can," Ethan said, "to make sure they don't." Lily looked at him closely. "Why?" "You don't even know me." Ethan turned his head slightly, his voice steady. "Because sometimes helping someone is reason enough. You don't need to explain your whole life to deserve protection." A soft smile appeared on her lips, something delicate and hopeful. "You talk like someone who has lost too," she said. Ethan didn't respond. His silence spoke for him. Lily didn't push further. Instead, she rested her head on her knees and watched the land in front of them. The night was calm, but something in the air felt uneasy, as if the wind carried whispers of danger. She lifted her head. "Do you feel that?" she asked. Ethan nodded slowly. "Yes. The land is too quiet." He scanned the horizon. In the distance, a faint light flickered. Maybe a lantern, maybe someone searching. His jaw tightened again. He didn't say anything to Lily, not yet. She noticed anyway. "Is someone coming?" she whispered. "Maybe," Ethan said, "but we're not running tonight." Lily swallowed hard. Fear crept into her eyes again, but she trusted Ethan. She stayed close to him, watching the same distant light. The silence between them was filled not with fear, but with the quiet strength of two people who had suffered in different ways, but now sat together in the dark, unsure of what tomorrow might bring. But both knew one thing clearly: running forever wasn't possible, and hiding would not be enough. Sooner or later, the past would catch up, and when it did, neither of them would face it alone. The night grew heavier as the distant light flickered again, a slow, uncertain glow moving across the valley. Lily sat very still beside Ethan, her hands tightening around the edge of the bench. The quiet around them felt unnatural, as if every sound of the land had stepped back to make room for something unknown. Ethan's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. He didn't blink much. His body was calm, but his mind was racing. Lily finally whispered, "Is it them?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He watched the flickering glow, trying to understand if it was just a traveler or something more troubling. But the slow movement, the pauses, and the way the light disappeared and returned told him enough. "It's possible," he said quietly. "But don't be afraid. We'll deal with it." Lily swallowed hard. She wanted to feel brave, but her heart trembled. After everything she had gone through, she knew trouble rarely came alone. Every threat carried more shadows behind it. She looked at Ethan, who was calm, steady, a man who faced danger not because he wanted to, but because someone needed him to. "What should we do?" she asked. "For now, we stay alert," he said. "We don't act until we must." Ethan stood up and walked a few steps forward, trying to get a better look. The land stretched out endlessly, dark except for that one wandering light. The night wind brushed through the grass, bringing with it the faint smell of dust and dry earth. He took a deep breath. He reached into his coat and checked his rifle. Only one bullet remained, his final one. He turned it in his fingers, the cold metal pressing into his skin. This wasn't a weapon anymore. It was a final choice, a last promise he had made silently when he brought Lily here. He didn't want to use it. He hoped he wouldn't have to. Lily stepped closer to him. "I don't want you to risk everything for me," she said in a trembling voice. Ethan looked at her with steady eyes. "Some things," he said softly, "are worth risking everything." Lily felt her breath catch. For years, she had never heard words like that. No one had stayed, no one had fought for her, no one had even listened. And now, this quiet cowboy, who barely spoke of himself, was willing to stand between her and the world. But behind her new hope lived a deeper fear. She didn't want harm to come to him because of her. The light in the distance stopped moving. It simply hovered in one place. Ethan watched it for a long moment. Then he said, "They're searching." Lily felt her knees weaken. She stepped back and leaned against the cabin wall. "They found me," she whispered. "Maybe," Ethan said, "or maybe they're just looking around. But I won't let them take you." His voice was firm, not loud. Not angry, just steady like a promise carved into stone. He motioned her inside. "Stay in the cabin," he said. "Keep the lantern low." Lily hesitated. "I don't want to leave you out here alone." Ethan gave a small smile. "You're not leaving me. You're giving me space to protect you." She didn't like it, but she nodded and stepped inside. She stood by the window, her fingers gripping the edge of the curtain as she peeked out. Ethan stood tall outside, his silhouette a dark shape against the faint glow of the stars. Minutes felt like hours. Ethan did not move. He kept his eyes on the horizon, waiting, listening, reading the land like he had always done. The light finally began to approach, slow and steady. He could see a shadow behind it now, someone holding the lantern. Lily's heart beat faster. "Someone's coming," she whispered, even though he could not hear her. The figure continued forward until he stood far enough for Ethan to make out shape, movement, and attitude. It was a man, tall, with a hat pulled low and a coat that looked worn from long travel. The lantern in his hand swung slightly with every step. Ethan didn't raise the rifle, not yet. The man stopped about 30 feet away. "Evening," he called in a calm voice. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He measured the man's tone, his posture, the way he carried himself. Nothing felt openly hostile, but the night was not a time for trust. "What do you want?" Ethan finally called back. The man lifted the lantern a little. "I'm looking for someone," he said. "A young woman. People said she ran this way. Thought I might have seen her." Lily's breath stopped. Her hands shook on the window frame. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Why are you looking for her?" The man shrugged lightly. "Orders," he said. "Not my business why. I just follow what I'm told." Ethan stepped forward just a little. "Sometimes people give bad orders." The man tilted his head. "Maybe, but that doesn't change my job." Lily felt cold wash over her. She whispered, "Please go away. Please go away," even though the man couldn't hear her. The stranger took a step closer. "If she's here," he said. "I'll just take her back. No trouble needed." Ethan's voice grew firmer. "She's not going anywhere with you." The man let out a slow breath. "Didn't want things to get complicated," he said, "but I'm not leaving without her." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You'll be leaving one way or another." A long silence stretched between them. The wind blew dust across the ground. The lantern flickered. Lily watched with wide, terrified eyes. The man finally moved his hand toward his coat. Ethan raised his rifle instantly. "Don't," Ethan said sharply. The stranger froze for a moment, then lifted both hands slowly. "All right," he said. "No need to rush." But Ethan could see the man's eyes, sharp, calculating, trying to find a chance to move. Ethan shifted his stance, steadying his grip on the rifle. "You've got one bullet left," the man said quietly, as if he could somehow sense it. "I can see it in your face." Ethan said nothing. Lily pressed her forehead against the glass. Her breath fogged the window. She whispered, "Please, Ethan, don't let anything happen." The man lowered his voice. "You can't protect her forever," he said. "They'll keep coming until they get what they want." "Maybe," Ethan replied, "but not tonight." The man's expression changed. Frustration, maybe anger, maybe a recognition that this cowboy was not going to move aside. He took a small step back. "You're making a mistake," he said. "A big one." Ethan held the rifle steady. "Leave," he said. The man stared at him for a long second. Then he turned around slowly and began to walk away. The lantern swung in his hand, throwing long shadows across the land. His figure grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared into the night. Ethan remained still for several minutes until he was sure the stranger was gone. Only then did he lower the rifle and exhale, a long, heavy breath he had held far too long. Lily rushed out of the cabin, tears already in her eyes. "Ethan!" she whispered as she ran to him. He turned just in time to catch her as she collided gently against his chest. She held on to him, her body shaking with relief. "He was here for me," she cried softly. "He was really here." Ethan placed a calm hand on her back. "He's gone now." "But he'll come back," she whispered. "They all will." Ethan looked toward the horizon, where the stranger had disappeared. "Maybe," he said, "but I'll be ready, and you won't face them alone." Lily pulled back a little, her eyes wet but steady. "Why are you doing this for me?" Ethan wiped a tear from her cheek with the back of his hand. "Because everyone deserves someone who won't walk away." Lily took a shaky breath. "You don't even know how much this means." Ethan looked at her gently. "I know enough." The night seemed less frightening now. The stars above looked brighter, and the valley felt like it carried a quiet strength instead of fear. Lily leaned her head against his shoulder. For the first time in years, she felt protected, not hidden, not running, but truly protected. And Ethan, holding his rifle with the one last bullet still inside, understood something too. The fight wasn't over, but neither were they, and whatever came next, they would face it together.